The dust in Redemption, Nevada had a way of settling into a man's soul. It coated everything with the same gray resignation that hung over the town like a shroud. The Silver Queen Saloon stood on the main street, its paint peeling like dead skin, its windows clouded with years of grime and broken promises. Inside, the air tasted of stale whiskey and desperation. Lena stood on the small, creaking stage, her dress the color of old bruises, her voice cutting through the smoke-thick room like a blade. She was 28 but looked older. The years had carved shadows under her cheekbones and left a permanent wariness in her moss-green eyes. When she sang, she kept her gaze fixed on a stain on the far wall, never looking at the men who watched her with hungry eyes. They saw a woman for sale. They never saw her at all. Her voice was not beautiful in the way a church bell is beautiful. It was raw and wounded, a sound that came from some deep place of hurt. The cowboys and drifters listened because they recognized their own pain in it. She sang of lost loves and empty roads, of men who rode away and never came back. When the song ended, a few coins clattered onto the stage. She did not bend to pick them up. She simply nodded, her face blank as a winter sky, and disappeared through the curtain. Her room was a cage in the attic, a narrow cot, a cracked basin, a window that looked out on endless sage and dust. Everything in it belonged to Roy Manson, the man who owned the saloon. He had found her 5 years ago in Cheyenne, sick and starving, and he never let her forget it. "I saved you," he would whisper, his breath hot against her neck. "You owe me everything." And he collected on that debt every single day. That evening, as she washed the paint from her face, she heard shouting from below. A freight driver had grabbed young Millie, the barmaid, his thick fingers wrapped around her wrist like a vice. Lena's voice cut across the room, quiet but sharp as broken glass. "Let her go." Every head turned. The driver sneered at her, but something in her unwavering stare made him release the girl's arm with a grunt. "You got a mouth on you, singer," he spat. "One of these days, Manson's gonna shut it for good." Lena walked off the stage without a word. But outside in the alley, Roy Manson was waiting. His hand cracked across her face before she could even speak. "You embarrassed me," he hissed, raising his hand again. And then a voice came from the shadows, low and cold as a grave. "Get your hands off her." Bo Ransom stood in the dim light, a broken wagon spoke held loosely in his hand. He was not a large man, but there was something in his pale blue eyes that made Manson's enforcer hesitate. The fight was brutal and brief. Bo ended it on his knees, blood in his mouth, his knuckles split and raw. But the big man was down, groaning in the dirt. Manson looked at Bo with pure hatred, then turned and disappeared into the saloon. Lena led Bo to a storeroom. She cleaned his wounds with whiskey and linen, her touch hesitant at first, then steady. Their hands touched, his rough and scarred, hers pale and delicate. Neither spoke. The silence grew heavy with things unsaid. When she finished bandaging his knuckles, she did not let go. Her thumb traced a gentle line across his wrist, and he felt something he had not felt in 4 long years. A flicker of warmth, of life. It terrified him. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're not like them," she said softly. It was not a question. He pulled his hand away. "Don't be sure," he said roughly. It was a warning as much to himself as to her. Outside, thunder rumbled across the plains. A storm was coming, and they both knew it was already too late to run. Bo was supposed to leave at first light. He had sold his last cattle, the money tucked in his shirt pocket. He would ride east and never look back. That had been the plan. But when morning came, his horse had thrown a shoe. His wagon axle was sabotaged. Manson was keeping him here, tying him to this town because he did not want him near Lena. Bo was trapped. That night in the saloon, Lena sang with a frantic, brittle energy. She smiled, a painted smile that never reached her eyes. When her set ended, she drank whiskey at the bar until Manson approached, his hand possessive on her back. She flinched and fled into the night. Bo found her in the livery stable, drunk and desperate. She looked at him with wild eyes. "I'm tired of everything," she whispered. Then she kissed him. Her mouth tasted of whiskey and sorrow. It was not gentle. It was desperate, hungry, a collision of two broken souls. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to push her away. But for the first time in 4 years he felt something. She pulled back, searching his face for any sign of feeling. He gave her nothing. Her face crumpled. She took his hand and pressed it to her chest, just below her throat, where her heart beat like a trapped bird. "No one's ever kissed me there," she whispered, tears in her eyes. He trembled. A violent shudder racked his entire body. The wall around his heart cracked and splintered. Years of grief and loneliness came rushing to the surface. He felt everything, and it was too much. He pulled away, pushing her gently back. The hurt in her eyes turned to fury. She shoved him hard. "Get away from me," she spat. "You're just like the rest of them." She stumbled out into the darkness, leaving him alone, trembling with the ghost of a feeling he had sworn never to feel again. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. But that night, everything changed. Cole, Manson's enforcer, kicked open Lena's door in the dead of night. "Manson wants to see you," he grunted, grabbing her arm. She cried out, struggling, but he began dragging her down the stairs. Then Beau's voice cut through the darkness. "Let her go." He stood at the bottom of the stairs, a broken wagon spoke in his hand. Cole charged. Beau sidestepped and brought the spoke down on the big man's knee with a sickening crunch. Cole fell, howling in pain. Beau grabbed Lena's small satchel in her hand. "We're leaving," he said. It was not a request. They rode out of redemption under the cold light of a sliver moon, leaving everything behind. Beau chose a narrow mountain trail, dangerous in the dark, but one no posse would follow. They rode through the night until they reached a hidden meadow. In the center stood a ruined cabin, its roof sagging, its windows dark and vacant. This was where Beau had lived with his wife Sarah before the fever took her and their infant son. This was where his heart had died. Inside, the cabin was thick with dust and the ghosts of better days. Beau stared at the cold hearth he had built with his own hands, the pain of memory twisting in his gut. Lena watched him and suddenly understood. He had not rescued her out of heroism. He was running from his own ghosts, just as she was running from hers. They were two drowning people reaching for each other. The days that followed fell into a quiet rhythm. Beau worked from sunup to sundown, repairing the roof, fixing the chimney, rebuilding what had been broken. Lena helped where she could, gathering firewood, hauling water, sweeping away the years of dust. They spoke little, but in the evenings they sat by the fire in a silence that was no longer empty but shared. She mended his jacket. He cleaned his rifle. Small acts of care that meant more than words. One evening, Lena laughed when she struck her thumb with a hammer. It was a rusty, cracked sound, like an old music box being forced open. But it was real. Beau looked at her, and for the first time a shadow of warmth moved in his haunted eyes. At night, the hunger between them grew. He would lie on the floor, she on the cot, and the air would hum with unspoken desire. But he would not touch her. He clenched his fists and stared into the embers, fighting the longing that felt like sickness. Then came the night when the moon was full and bright. Lena could not sleep. She walked to the stream and stood on its bank. Then, slowly, deliberately, she began to unbutton her dress. She let it fall. She stood in the moonlight, pale and luminous, then waded into the icy water. Beau had followed her. He stood in the shadows, telling himself to look away. But he could not. He saw her body, marked with scars and old bruises, a map of the cruelty she had endured. She turned and found his eyes in the darkness. "This is me," she said, holding her arms out. "All of it. Do not look away." He did not. He walked straight into the freezing stream, fully clothed, the water soaking through his jeans and shirt. He stopped in front of her, trembling. He cupped her face with a shaking hand. "Lena," he breathed. and then he kissed her. It was desperate and raw, the kiss of two people who had been starving for years. They clung to each other in the icy water, two drowning souls finally reaching shore. Later, before the fire, he laid her down gently. He traced each scar on her body, not with pity but with reverence. He kissed each one, a silent promise that no one would ever hurt her again. They moved together slowly, tenderly, relearning the language of touch and connection. She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "No one's ever kissed me there." She guided his hand to her heart. This time he did not pull away. He leaned down and kissed that very spot, kissing the wild, beautiful beat of her heart. The meadow became their sanctuary. Bo taught Lena to ride, his hand steady over hers, his voice patient. She began to cook and sew, reclaiming pieces of herself that had been buried. She started to sing again, not the bruised ballads of the saloon, but simple folk songs, her voice clear and sweet. They were building a life from the splinters of their broken pasts. But the world does not forget. Roy Manson posted a bounty for Lena, claiming she was a thief. Two hard men took the bait and tracked them into the mountains. The ambush came on a clear afternoon. The first shot tore through Bo's shoulder, throwing him from his horse. Lena screamed. The two bounty hunters moved down the slope, confident and unhurried. Bo yelled at her to run, but she did not run. She pulled Bo's rifle from the saddle. He had taught her how to use it, making her practice until it felt familiar in her hands. "Drop it, girl," one of the men called. Lena raised the rifle to her shoulder, resting it on the saddle for support. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The younger man raised his own rifle. She squeezed the trigger, just as Bo had taught her. The rifle bucked. The man staggered back, a dark hole in his chest, and collapsed into the snow. The other man fired a wild shot and fled into the trees. Lena stood frozen, staring at the body. The rifle fell from her shaking hands. She had killed a man. Bo's weak voice cut through her shock. "We have to go!" They fled into a maze of canyons as snow began to fall. By nightfall, Bo was delirious with fever. Lena found a shallow cave and built a fire. She cleaned his wound with snow and whiskey, tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. Through the long night, she fought to keep him alive, packing snow on his forehead, forcing water between his lips. And she talked, whispering stories of her past, spinning a lifeline of words to keep him breathing. She told him about the piano she had played in her father's house, the silk gloves she had worn. She told him about the cold, wealthy man her father had married her to, a man who had treated her like property. "He never touched my body like he wanted it," she whispered through tears, "just like he owned it." She talked all night, her voice growing hoarse, until the fever finally broke. When Bo woke, weak but lucid, they sat in the quiet cave and the last of their defenses crumbled. Lena told him everything, about her husband, about her flight west, about Roy Manson buying her in Cheyenne. "He didn't rescue me," she said. "He bought me." Bo told her about Sarah and their son, about the fever that took them both. "I sealed off my heart," he said. "I swore I'd never let anyone in again. But then I heard you sing, and your voice started to fill the silence." Tears streamed down Lena's face. He had not seen a whore or a broken thing. He had heard her soul. That night, they held each other under shared blankets, their bodies bare and trusting, wrapped together against the cold. Two scarred people learning to lean on each other so both might stand. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Spring came slowly. The snow retreated, revealing dark earth. They began to believe in a future. Bo cut wood for the next winter. Lena marked out a small garden plot. They were no longer fugitives. They were a man and a woman building a life. Then a traveling preacher appeared at the edge of the meadow. Lena, hungry for grace and forgiveness, invited him in despite Bo's wariness. But halfway through his meal, the preacher recognized her. His kind face hardened with judgment. "You're the thief from redemption," he said. He left without another word. They both knew he would send word. 2 days later, Manson came with the sheriff and 2 deputies. Lena looked like a wild animal caught in a trap, ready to run. But Bo stepped in front of her. "There will be no gunfight," he said, raising his empty hands. "She'll have a trial. We'll do this by the law." The trial was held in the Silver Queen Saloon, a mob masquerading as justice. Manson testified, weaving his lies about stolen money. Other men spoke of her loose morals, throwing stones with every word. Lena sat silent, her head bowed under the weight of their judgment. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she slowly raised her head. "My name is Helena Marie Cartwright," she began, using her real name for the first time in 5 years. She told them everything: the loveless marriage, the husband who treated her like property, her flight west, and Roy Manson. "He didn't rescue me," she said, her voice steady and clear. "He bought me. He took everything and paid me in bruises and fear." The saloon fell silent. Then Millie, the young barmaid, stood up. "She's telling the truth," Millie said. "We all saw him hit her." Another woman stood, then another. The tide turned. The judge, seeing the shift in the crowd, stammered that she was not guilty. She was free. But that night, in the livery stable, Lena was not celebrating. She was trembling with a new fear. "You came for me because I was broken," she whispered to Bo. "But I'm free now. I'm clean. So what do you need me for?" Bo dropped to one knee in the dirt. He took her hands and gently kissed her wrists, kissing the old scars left by a life of being owned and hurt. It was an act of worship, a vow. He loved her not because she was broken, but because she was her, all of her. They returned to the high meadow as free people. But the ghosts followed. Lena woke, screaming from nightmares about the man she had killed. Bo flinched at loud noises, his hand going to his healed shoulder. They argued over nothing, the small conflicts, sparks thrown off by the grinding friction of their pasts. One afternoon, Lena threw down the shirt she was mending. "I can't do this," she cried. "We're pretending we can be normal people. But I'm a woman who killed a man, and you're half a ghost." "Then what do you want?" Bo shot back. "Run again?" The word struck her like a blow. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" he countered, his own anger rising from fear. "I can't erase what happened. I can't give you back the girl who played piano." Tears streamed down her face. "I don't want you to. I just want to not be so afraid." The anger drained from him. He pulled her into his arms. "I know," he murmured. "I'm afraid too." Quote. But Manson's hatred was not a ghost. It was a promise. On a moonless night, 2 men he had hired set fire to the cabin. Bo and Lena barely escaped, stumbling into the meadow as their home was consumed by flames. Then Lena saw another glow in the distance. The wind had carried embers to the Henderson family's homestead. Their barn was burning. A child's scream pierced the night. Lena ran. She did not think. She just ran through the smoky woods toward that terrible sound. Martha Henderson was screaming that her boy was still inside. Lena smashed a window with a rock and climbed through into hell. The heat was immense, the smoke choking. She dropped to the floor and crawled, finding the terrified boy under his bed. She pulled him out, carried him to the window, and pushed him through to his father's arms. A flaming beam crashed down behind her. She pulled herself through the window and tumbled onto the wet grass, coughing and gasping. Bo was there, his hands running over her, his face a mask of terror and relief. The next morning, the sun rose on devastation. Both the cabin and the Henderson house were smoking ruins. They had lost everything again. But by mid-morning, people began to arrive. The Hendersons with food and blankets, then others from scattered homesteads, even faces from Redemption. The women who had whispered about Lena now approached with quiet respect. The men who had been suspicious now offered their hands. John Henderson clapped Bo on the shoulder. "We'll rebuild," he said. And they did. The community raised a new cabin, larger and stronger. The air filled with the clean smell of cut pine and the sounds of hammers and saws. Bo and Lena worked alongside them, their grief giving way to profound gratitude. They were no longer outsiders. They were part of this place. One afternoon, Bo showed Lena how to drive a nail, his hand over hers. She swung, and the nail went in clean. She turned to him, her face smudged with sawdust, and laughed. A full, clear, joyous laugh. Beau found himself laughing with her. They stood in the skeleton of their future home and laughed until tears streamed down their faces. That night, lying under the stars, Lena took Beau's hand and placed it on her lower belly. "The garden will have to be bigger than we planned," she said softly. "I'm with child." Beau went utterly silent. For one terrifying moment, Lena thought he was angry. Then a choked sob broke from him. He rolled onto his back and wept. He wept for the wife and son he had lost. He wept for 4 empty years of wandering like a dead man. And he wept with a joy so fierce it was a beautiful, shattering agony. He was feeling everything, and it was making him whole. Lena leaned over him, her hair falling around his face like a curtain. She pulled his arm from his eyes and looked down at him, her own tears falling freely. He looked up at this impossible, courageous woman who had called his soul back from the dead. She guided his lips down to the new life in her womb. "No one's ever kissed me there," she whispered. She kissed his tear-streaked face. "No one's ever loved me like you." Beneath the vast blanket of stars, on land that had tried to kill them, they kissed again. It was not a kiss of desperation or hunger. It was the kiss of a beginning, fierce, hopeful, alive.